One specific metal is essential to keep you alive. However, the very same metal in a dose only slightly exceeding the limit becomes a poison. There is no third option. Your body is incapable of manufacturing it, cannot survive without it, and cannot store any excess without suffering harm. It must arrive from an external source in an amount so precise that being incorrect in either direction causes genuine damage. That metal is copper. And 4,000 years before anyone possessed the technology to measure a single milligram, Ayurvedic households were dosing it through ritual. Water was stored overnight in a copper vessel and consumed at dawn. This was not for flavor. It was not for tradition alone. They held the belief that the metal transformed the water and, subsequently, transformed the body. They never provided a technical explanation for how. They simply passed the practice down from household to household and generation to generation with no specific mechanism to point to. Eventually, modern instruments sought the reason why. What they discovered was not folklore disguised as science. It was ion chemistry that had been hiding in plain sight for millennia. The dosing window is so narrow that it is almost unsettling that anyone identified it without the aid of a laboratory. 3 specific things about copper resist any easy explanation. First, bacteria perish on its surface within minutes, while the same bacteria can survive for days on steel or glass. Second, the structural proteins within your skin and arteries physically cannot be assembled without it. Third, deep inside every single cell, copper resides at the center of the machinery that converts oxygen into usable energy. These are 3 locked doors. By the end of this decode, all 3 will open, and so will a 4th door that the ancients understood better than we tend to give them credit for. The exact boundary between the dose that heals and the dose that harms. Here's your first check-in. Notice your jaw right now. Is it clenched? Drop it. Let your shoulders fall an inch. There is nothing mystical here. You are simply holding tension you never agreed to, and letting it go returns a little attention to your own body, which is exactly where it needs to be for the next 15 minutes. The ancients lacked microscopes, cell biology, and peer-reviewed pages. What they possessed was observation across generations. And observation, when repeated enough times across enough households, becomes data, whether anyone calls it that or not. Copper is one of the few trace metals the human body cannot do without and cannot hold in excess without being harmed by it. That paradox is the first real clue. Too little and critical enzymes cease to function. Too much, and the same element becomes a poison. The ancients found the window through nothing but generational trial, not mere luck. It was inherited pattern recognition, encoded as ritual, because no one yet possessed the vocabulary to call it chemistry. This is the cipher, a daily practice encoding a mechanism that nobody could name at the time. We are about to name all 4. The first lock is antimicrobial. Copper ions released into standing water disrupt bacterial cell membranes upon direct contact, an effect researchers refer to as the oligodynamic effect. The ions destabilize the membrane until the cell simply collapses. This is not folk medicine in new clothing. It is the reason why hospitals install copper alloy surfaces on door handles, bed rails, and IV poles. In controlled ward studies, copper fittings carried significantly lower microbial loads than the standard materials placed beside them. Laboratory testing has measured bacterial reductions above 99% on copper surfaces. That is the first door. This one is genuinely about the vessel itself. Stored water left in copper ends up measurably cleaner than water left in glass. But the ancients were not only purifying water, they were reaching for something the metal does once it is inside you. That is the second signal, and it points deeper than bacteria. Pause for a second check-in. Relax your tongue off the roof of your mouth. Unclench your hands if they have quietly closed. These small holding patterns cost you nothing to release, so release them and keep listening. Copper's second job lives inside an enzyme most people have never heard of, lysyl oxidase. This enzyme cannot function without copper acting as its cofactor. Its specific task is to cross-link collagen and elastin, literally stitching the structural proteins in your skin, blood vessels, and connective tissue into a stable, resilient architecture that holds its shape under load. When copper runs short, lysyl oxidase activity drops, and the cross-linking falters. In deficiency, connective tissue forms weak and disorganized. This is a documented biochemical pathway in connective tissue research. The enzyme fails without its copper. Notice what I am not saying. I am not telling you that copper water tightens your face. I am telling you that the machine that builds your structural tissue does not run without this metal in the system. Those are different claims, and the honest one is the more interesting of the two. One shared element: bacteria dying on contact on the outside, and the scaffolding of your own body depending on the same metal on the inside. These are two mechanisms discovered by ritual centuries before the biochemistry existed to explain either. The third lock is the deepest. Copper sits at the center of cytochrome C oxidase, the copper-dependent enzyme that forms the final step of your cellular energy chain, where oxygen is reduced to water and energy is released. When copper is adequate, that step runs cleanly. When copper is deficient, the activity of this enzyme drops, the energy chain backs up, and mitochondria leak more reactive oxygen. This is the same oxidative stress repeatedly linked to tissue degeneration and the slow structural decline most people simply accept as inevitable. This is not energized water carrying a vague life force. It is an actual copper-dependent enzyme inside your cell's power plant, whose output depends on a metal your body has to receive from the outside every single day. Final check-in. Notice your breath. Is it shallow, sitting high in your chest? Drop it into your belly. Slow it down. You have been decoding hard. Give your nervous system one deliberate breath before the last door. And now the fourth door, the one the original storytellers may have understood most sharply of all. Everything I have described is what copper does when it is present in the right amount. Push past that amount and every benefit inverts. The tolerable upper intake level for an adult is 10 milligrams a day. Beyond it, the first signs are nausea, cramping, and digestive distress. Sustained excess strains the liver. The ancients had no number, but they had a delivery method that self-limited the dose. Plain water left overnight in the vessel picks up only a fraction of a milligram. The ritual was not decoration around the benefit. The ritual was the dosing system. It was a way to take a dangerous essential metal in an amount that stayed inside the window every day without ever knowing the window existed. So here is the permission slip. You do not need to believe copper water rewrites your biology. You only need to understand what it actually is: a low, self-limiting daily dose of an essential metal delivered by a vessel that also measurably cleans the water it holds. That is a defensible reason to try it, and the whole reason it survived 4,000 years. If you do it the way the window demands. Use a vessel of genuinely pure copper, not plated or alloyed. Store plain room temperature water only. Never use citrus, never juice, and never anything acidic because acid strips copper into the water fast enough to push you past the safe line. Fill it at night, let it stand for 8 to 12 hours, and drink it in the morning. 1 vessel's worth. Rinse it out. Do not let old water sit for days. And if you have Wilson's disease or any diagnosed copper handling condition, this practice is not for you. Skip it entirely and stay with glass or steel. Here is the honest arc. Day 1, you will notice nothing but the faint, clean taste of the water. And that is correct. This is not a stimulant, and anyone promising a same-day jolt is selling you something. Day 7, the only real change is that the ritual has become automatic. The vessel is filled without a decision. The morning glass is simply there. Day 30, what you have actually built is not a transformation you can feel by Tuesday, but a small, steady, correctly dosed input running quietly in the background of the machinery we spent this whole decode explaining. The enzymes, the scaffolding, the power plant. It is undramatic, repeatable, and real. That is what ancient wisdom actually means when stripped of mysticism. It is not magic standing in for science. It is pattern recognition arriving centuries before the instruments that would confirm it. This includes the wisdom to stop at the exact line where a medicine becomes a poison. So tell me in the comments, are you already a copper vessel drinker? Or is this your first time hearing the window explain? Type ritual if you have done it for years. Type decode if you are starting this week. If this story has changed the way you look at the simple elements in your home, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the history and science that they tried to keep hidden. Let's plant the seeds for a better understanding of the future. The next treasure of knowledge will be opened very soon.